December 2025, Eastern Ukraine. Russian troops braced for battle, but it was not Ukrainian fire that brought their convoys to a standstill. As temperatures plummeted to -20 degrees Celsius, entire armored columns froze in place, fuel supplies vanished, and up to a quarter of the vehicles were lost without a single shot. The myth of General Winter has turned against Russia itself. What exactly tipped the balance, and why are soldiers suffering more from the cold than from the enemy? The answers are stranger and far more urgent than Moscow will admit. On December 19, 2025, ERA-5 weather data logged a sharp drop. -20 degrees Celsius gripped the Pokrovsk sector, turning the main supply corridor into a frozen bottleneck. On December 15th, open-source satellite imagery captured a 22-truck convoy immobilized on the H-20 highway north of the city. Engines sat dead, exhaust gone, no movement for hours. Open-source intelligence analysts flagged the stillness, time-stamped and geolocated, impossible to dismiss. The trucks, spaced in uneven lines, blocked the road in both directions, their shadows stretched by a low winter sun. Nearby, snowdrifts piled against tires and undercarriages, hinting at how long the vehicles had stood exposed to the cold. Telegram channels circulated the images with overlays labeling each vehicle in the queue. Analysts annotated the date, location, and temperature, cross-referencing with ERA-5's charted temperature plunge. Each data point built the case. The freeze did not just slow movement, it halted it. There were no signs of shell craters or shrapnel. These machines were lost to weather, not warfare. The convoy's fate matched local reports of fuel lines solidifying and batteries failing in the cold, with no rescue teams dispatched for hours. The evidence left little room for doubt. Pokrovsk's supply artery, once a lifeline, had become a static graveyard for Russian logistics, sealed in by the cold. January 2026 brings no relief west of Pokrovsk. In Mirnorod, another supply column sits frozen in place, this time on the T-0504, a secondary artery meant to bypass the worst blockages further east. Sentinel satellite passes from January 14th and 16th capture the same gridlocked pattern: rows of military trucks and armored vehicles, engines off and caked with frost. Local meteorological data confirms the cold's grip. Temperatures average -18 degrees Celsius for 3 straight days, dipping lower at night. In this sector, open-source intelligence loss trackers log a spike in immobilizations. 1 in 4 vehicles in the Mirnorod sector is marked as abandoned or non-operational, with no visible combat damage. The numbers are consistent across multiple datasets, echoing the Pokrovsk freeze. Analysts highlight a pattern: vehicles spaced at irregular intervals, some clustered in ditches, others angled off the road, left behind as crews attempt to trek back on foot. No signs of recovery teams appear in the imagery. Instead, the convoy becomes a static feature in subsequent satellite frames, gradually buried by drifting snow. The evidence from Mirnorod is not an isolated incident, it is a mirror of the wider collapse. The cold is not just stalling a single route, it is paralyzing an entire front, confirming that the freeze is neither local nor fleeting, but a persistent threat stretching across the Donetsk axis. At -20 degrees Celsius, the rules of engineering change. Diesel fuel, the lifeblood of Russian military vehicles, starts to thicken and cloud just below -10 degrees Celsius. By -20 degrees Celsius, it turns to gel inside the lines and tanks, choking engines that were never designed for this kind of cold. Without special additives or preheating systems, standard Russian diesel reaches its failure point in under an hour. Mechanics call it the paraffin wall. Once crossed, no amount of cranking will restart a frozen engine. Batteries, already weakened by months of hard use, lose half their power at -18 degrees Celsius. Lead-acid cells, common in Ural trucks and BMP-2s, struggle to deliver enough current to turn over a cold-soaked block. Each attempt drains the remaining charge faster. Crews sometimes try to swap batteries between vehicles, but at these temperatures, even a fresh battery can go flat before the starter motor completes a single revolution. Hydraulic systems fare no better. Fluids thicken, seals contract, and actuators seize. Turrets on T-72s and BMP-2s become impossible to traverse, leaving armored vehicles unable to aim or fire. The cold turns every moving part into a liability. In these conditions, a stalled truck or tank is not just delayed, it is as good as lost. The mechanical threshold for survival is not set by enemy fire, but by the thermometer. Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia's fuel infrastructure began early in 2025 and did not let up. On January 8th, the Crystal Oil Depot in Saratov took a direct hit, burning through hundreds of thousands of tons of jet fuel. Less than 3 weeks later, the Ryazan refinery, one of Russia's largest, was struck twice, forcing a full shutdown on January 27th. Syzran, another key facility in Samara, faced repeated attacks through spring, but a December 5th strike finally halted its operations entirely. By October, more than half of Russia's major refineries had been damaged or idled, with 21 out of 38 reporting significant disruptions. The government responded by suspending fuel exports on June 25th, hoping to shore up dwindling domestic supplies. The repercussions rippled straight to the front. Diesel production slumped, and the military supply chain, already stretched, became even more fragile. The corridor from Russia's refineries to the Donetsk front now spanned nearly 500 kilometers, with every extra mile compounding the risk of delay or loss. Repair crews struggled to keep up as damaged facilities waited for foreign parts blocked by sanctions. Each shutdown forced fuel to be rerouted, rationed, or imported at higher cost, leaving frontline units dependent on a supply line that was both longer and weaker than ever before. There was no backup plan. As the cold deepened and the roads froze, the consequences of these strikes became impossible to ignore. A Russian soldier's voice, shaky and raw, echoes through a short telegram clip dated January 12th. He describes blackened feet, frost-bitten beyond saving, stranded on the edge of Pokrovsk with no evacuation in sight. The coordinates, later confirmed by OSINT analysts, match a line of abandoned Ural trucks frozen into the roadside snow. Just weeks earlier, on December 28th, another video surfaced from the outskirts of Mirnorad. This time, a group huddles in a half-buried dugout, their breath visible in the air. One mutters no fuel, engines frozen, Ukrainians did not even shoot. The time-stamped footage, cross-referenced with ECMWF weather records, shows freezing temperatures plunging below -25 degrees. These are not isolated stories. Medevac trackers logged more than 450 cases of hypothermia and frostbite along the Donetsk axis between December and January. Many of the wounded never reached hospitals in time. The cold did not just sap strength, it cut through discipline, leaving soldiers to plead for rescue over battered radios. In these moments, the war shrinks to a single trench, a frozen boot, a silent convoy. The numbers in the reports become faces, young, desperate, and left to the mercy of a winter that no longer takes sides. On January 20th, a voice message from a Russian frontline unit surfaced on Telegram. The words cut through static. The message said, "We are not moving. We are freezing. Command says hold." Across the front from Pokrovsk to Mirnorad, the numbers tell the same story. Russian advances, once measured in kilometers per week, now crawl at less than 1 kilometer per month. Analysts overlay daily progress charts from December and January. Lines that once crept forward now flatten, then stall entirely. Loss trackers log the toll in cold, hard numbers. Between December 2025 and January 2026, the Pokrovsk sector saw roughly 200 Russian vehicles abandoned or immobilized by the freeze, compared to 500 destroyed in direct combat. The ratio is stark. For every 2.5 vehicles lost to enemy fire, one is simply left to the elements. Morale cracks under the pressure. Intercepted audio from January 20th captures a soldier's blunt admission. Nobody wants to be first out of the trench. We're losing more to the cold than to the Ukrainians. OSINT analysts assemble comparison charts, on one side combat losses, on the other cold attrition. The gap narrows week by week until winter itself rivals the battlefield as the main cause of Russian losses. Momentum, once driven by Moscow's push, is now frozen in place. As supply lines falter and winter deepens, Russia's greatest military adversary may be its own logistics. These breakdowns expose a hard truth. Modern warfare punishes weakness, regardless of the flag. What happens on these frozen front lines could reshape the next phase of this conflict. Subscribe for more Frontline insights.